All right, so just to give me a little bit of a backdrop while I'm talking, I think that we have had overall a very positive experience coming back to schools this year. So much so that we were able to welcome more students back more of the time than we had originally anticipated. So in order to do that, I wanted to let you know a little bit about what the notifications that you're receiving are and how we're keeping track of all of any positive COVID-19 cases that we see in the district. So on the next slide, there's just a couple of basic definitions, and just so that you understand who we are contacting and when. Anyone who's deemed to be a close contact to someone who tests positive with COVID-19 is contacted directly by one of our school nurses and or one of the contact tracers from the Department of Health, but all of our school-related contacts, close contacts, are notified directly by one of our school nurses, and they are guided through a whole conversation about what they need to do, why they were considered a close contact. But those close contacts and how many people are under quarantine are not disclosed to anyone else, and it's not a notification that we make publicly. Similarly, we don't notify when a person is under quarantine or in isolation. So people are under quarantine if they have been in close contact with someone who has been diagnosed with COVID-19. And someone in isolation has either been assumed to be positive for COVID-19 because they demonstrate a number of symptoms but have not been tested, or because they come back with a positive test. And again, we've not been notifying for every case of quarantine or an isolation that is not accompanied by a positive result. What we have been notifying the whole district community for is whenever we have a positive case. So we will continue to do that whenever there is a student or staff member. And I will say we have even notified for people who are tangential to the district, but who do have an association with either our students or our staff members. We consult with the Middletown Department of Health each time we have a positive case reported in the district, and we consult with them to find out who we need to notify, if we need to notify. And I would say before yesterday, I would say confidently that we have notified for more cases than we had to. About half of the cases that we've notified for, we actually didn't have to, based on exposure to the building. So the district has taken a stance of being very transparent with the COVID-19 exposure to the buildings and to our district's students and staff. So I say that we didn't have to notify because I think that our quarantining procedures and our close contact procedures are pretty conservative, to the point where we have had people home on quarantine when they are then diagnosed with COVID-19. So they've never been in the building since being exposed to COVID-19, and therefore there were no additional students or staff members who would have been exposed. Let's see, what else did I want to tell you? We have currently, we can look at the next one with a little bit of the graphic. We have had no evidence of any student-to-student transmission of COVID-19. We've had no evidence of student-to-teacher or teacher-to-student transmission of COVID-19 in our schools. So we believe that, again, all those procedures that we're following are working, and that we're keeping everybody as healthy and as safe as we possibly can. We also, again, work with the Middletown Department of Health each time we have a case to figure out what we need to do. And this is one chart that the New Jersey Department of Health released and that we follow, that describes when we would close a classroom, when we would close a building, and when we need to do a little bit more of a deeper dig into where these cases are before we can figure out what to do with them. So I bring this up because I'm sure that many of you have seen the letters of notification that have come out over the last 2 days. Again, we look at each of those and we're monitoring the situation, and we will continue to do that so that we can make sure that we can bring more students back for phases 5 and 6. So again, we are using the data, but we're also consulting with the Middletown Department of Health each time so that we know where exactly we stand with those statistics. So our next phases we are in now phase 4. So we have introduced more students to the schools more of the time. Phase 5 is anticipated to begin in the middle of November. So what we have done is we have sent out a survey to all of our remote learners and their families to see which of those students would like to come back to school beginning on or around November 16th. And again, we will meet with the Department of Health to see if our statistics and data demonstrate that we have the ability to bring back more students. But we also want to see what that would look like. What is the effect going to be on our transportation? What's going to be the effect on our classrooms? And we are working with many stakeholders to try to figure out what's the best way to get as many students back in as quickly as possible. So there are a couple of different plans kind of floating around that we're trying to figure out how to do that in the best way. After phase 5, we are looking forward to phase 6, which I would love to see that December 14th start date occur. And again, we will keep consulting with the Department of Health, as well as in that case, I believe that we're going to work with at least an epidemiologist and more than that to determine when we can bring back all of our students who are ready to come back for 5 days of instruction per week. At that point, parents will still have the option to continue with reduced in-person instruction on the 2 days that they were assigned, but all of our students would be welcome. So with that said, as Mr. Little mentioned a little while ago, there are some implications for bringing back more students. So we need to make sure that when we bring back more students, that we are ready to have students with less than 6 feet of social distance between them. So in each of these phases, we're looking at that PPE. We're looking at those desk dividers. We're looking at how can we reorient our classrooms to make sure that our students and our staff, again, stay as safe as possible. So those are the things that our school-based pandemic response teams are looking at. And they are each tasked with coming up with ideas and plans for, again, how to keep those classrooms as safe as possible and how to keep students as separated as possible. One of the other topics that has been in those phased plans, and I only chose the highlights from the website, so please go to the website to see more of those details. The in-person dining and in-person lunch has been a big question, so I just wanted to address the fact that lunches cannot continue or cannot happen in our schools until it's actually Executive Order 175 that would need to change. And that states that every student would need to be 6 feet apart from one another in order to safely have lunch in our buildings. So yes, we are waiting for state indoor dining regulations to loosen a little bit, but it would also have to come down to Executive Order 175. So these are some of the updates that I've been giving to schools' pandemic response teams this week and last week. As they've come up with their plans, again, to incorporate snack time and how are we going to do elementary specials on premises. I'm trying to think of what other things they've been tackling, but all of our buildings are trying to come up with plans for, again, how do we get kids back in the buildings and do it in a safe way.